Good afternoon, everybody. Very nice to see you all. I'm delighted to have been asked to introduce this afternoon's conversation between artist Abigail Reynolds and graphic designer Michael Kelly. Thank you also, Jonty, for your introduction to me. My name is James Green. I'm director of Newlyn Art Gallery and The Exchange. And over the weekend, we opened Abigail's amazing show across our two sites at Newlyn and the Exchange in Penzance, a show called Walking A Cappella. And it's a really major project. It's a project which reflects the full breadth of Abigail's rather remarkable practice. So I hope you very much that you will find an opportunity to come and see it. It's on until May, so you have lots and lots and lots of time to catch it. Abigail works across a range of media, including print, sculpture, film and video, and live events. And collage is a technique which she applies across all of those media. She often worked in close dialogue with other disciplines, from geologists, electronic music producers, paleobiologists, librarians, and brass bands. She's based in St Just in West Cornwall, a place that permeates much of her work. And she draws on it and its humanity, its industrial histories, and draws on processes and customs of practice within the community, things like drawing on the ability to burn seaweed and make glass from beach sand, to walking the bounds. Reynolds studied English literature at St Catherine's College in Oxford University before an MA in Fine Art at Goldsmiths College. In 2016, she was awarded the BMW Art Journey Prize at Art Basel and used this money to travel to a series of lost libraries along the route of the Silk Road. And a book, The Lost Libraries, emerged from that process and was published in 2018. Abigail exhibits widely. In 2020 to 2022, her work was featured in the British Art Show 9, and as well as her new exhibition with us, her work currently is included in Out of Paper at Falmouth Art Gallery, which runs on, Out of Paper, which is running at Falmouth Art Gallery until the 24th of January. So if you haven't seen it, I'm sure many of you will have, do please catch that exhibition. Her work is well represented in public collections, from the New York Public Library and the Government Art Collection to the Arts Council collection. Michael is a graphic designer based in London whose practice incorporates exhibition design, website, branding, audio, visual and records, as well as we'll hear tonight, books. Michael is a part-time lecturer in BA and MA graphic design courses at the University of Brighton. In 2019, he was awarded the Grand Prize for the Tokyo Type Directors Club for his typeface VR. After this, he joined Faze and Mugridge Studio in London, where he held the position of senior designer. He left the studio in 2014 and has since partnered with David McKendrick Studio, Wolf Hall, Studio Bikini, and with a range of independent producers. Over the past 8 months, Michael and Abigail have been collaborating on Abigail's monograph, Walking A Cappella, and together they will discuss the process of trying to create a book that would encapsulate elements of the artist's practice, both in its form and structure, design and content. So please do welcome Abigail and Michael.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, James. So it's great to be here with you. I felt like it would be really... So when I was an art student, nobody ever talked to me about making a book out of my practice, or the idea of how you could represent your practice maybe in a print format. And probably they didn't talk to me about it in representing myself in any format. But so today, what we wanted to do, and since Michael's come here for my opening, which was on Saturday at Newlyn Exchange Galleries, I just wanted to sort of share with you this process of how we came to make the book that we've made, because so it's a monograph, meaning it's only about me, and rather than a catalogue, which would be about the show, it's much broader than the show, and it's really an artist's book in that it it approaches the book not in the way, I don't know, not in a, I think of it as an artist's book because it, so what we're going to do is we're just going to give you a quick preview of the book, which is here. And I'll just say something about it. So I didn't know how I could structure my work into a book. I felt like I work in so many media. I didn't want to split my works down by media, as in, you know, have a section that was all about sculpture, because that's not how I think about it at all. I think about it as ideas and some wall-based. I mean, I kind of think about everything I do as sculpture and also as collage. So it just, you know, even if it's a performance, so it doesn't work. So that was the first problem that I had. So when I found Michael, which I did so we'd worked together very lightly on a journal called Inscription, a journal of material book culture.
Material text.
Material text.
Yeah.
So it's a journal that literally thinks about the materiality of books, which is something that I think about a lot inside my practice, and also Michael obviously thinks about as a book designer. So I bind books. The work I did for British Art Show 9 involved a lot of bookbinding, but I also, I'm just looking at things going past, I also gild onto glass, I cut glass, I copper foil glass, I make prints. So I have this sort of enormous pile of work, and when I came to write the introduction to the book, I realised I literally think about it as walking around a landscape, and I sort of notice things, and then one thing leads to another, and one path leads to another, and somehow these sites on the landscape get connected up. So as Michael's paging through here, you can see that a lot of things, I don't know how much to say about it, but you might notice that there's a flow of images. So these two images, for example, one of them is a film still. This one, The Mother's Bones 2016, is a film still, but it's next to a collage. But there's a sort of reciprocity between these two images, I think. That was a little overview of just some of the spreads, which designers call them, of the book. This is a hole in Penwith. And so having spoken to Michael and thought, I was looking for a designer who I felt like I could really go on a journey with. So I met Michael, and he's worked on some really exciting books. So we said, well, let's start by you just coming to Cornwall and staying, come to the studio. So Michael came to the studio. He arrived on the train on a Friday, went to the studio. My studio's in Porthmeor in St Ives. Looked at I've got a lot of glass in my studio. We looked at some things. And then it was Tarly night in St Just at the old haberdashery where my daughter works. And we went with Otis, my son, and Otis was saying, oh, Mum, we were going to go down a mine last weekend and we didn't do it. And I was like, well, maybe we can do it this week. I don't know. Michael said, I don't know, maybe next weekend. And then Michael said, oh.
I was like, yeah, I'll go down a mine.
Like, oh, can
amazing.
I come? So we went down this mine. We're going to show you a little clip of us. So we went down this mine. And it was really kind of, went down a kind of mine in St Just where you can just walk in. And on the way out of the mine, there's this sort of weird little hole that none of us had noticed. And as Michael was walking out, he said to Otis, what's that hole? And Otis sort of said, well, I don't know. and then we couldn't find Michael, and he'd vanished into the hole. He'd just gone into this tiny hole. And Otis sort of saw his feet sticking out of it. And this is Michael climbing out of the hole. These are not Michael's clothes, I just want to say. These are some clothes that he borrowed to go down the hole. And the reason I'm telling you this story is, so we really went not only into my practice, but literally into the landscape. And I realised that Michael's someone where if we're going to go down a hole, he'll really go 100% down, further than me. And that is how the book is designed. It's like me, but further in book design, which is really exciting. So we also went to, so as well as, because in the exhibition, when you see it, there's a work called A Book of Holes. And we went down a hole. Here's Michael going through another hole. Do you know where this is? Yes, well, yeah, good. Yeah. I asked this to a group of A-level students down at Falmouth Art Gallery the other day, and none of them had heard of the Menentol. I was actually a bit horrified, and then I thought, well, they live in Falmouth, why would they know about the Menentol? Anyway, the Menentol is a Neolithic monument, which I've used in my work multiple ways. So we actually sort of went through these holes and went to all of these places, and we didn't really sum up really what we were going to do. We just had this really great weekend of going to all kind of my favourite places and down mines. And So here we are looking down at my studio, and this is a different piece of work, but I have this habit of using the floor of my studio because it's so much easier, because you don't have to hold the bits of paper up that you're looking at. Obviously, it's quicker to rearrange. And so I often make collage by just moving things around on the studio floor. And when Michael came in March, I was trying to reorganise the film that's in Newlyn, at the Exchange Gallery, A Book of Holes, which I did in this really backwards way by printing off a still image of all the film clips, all the different clips of footage that I had, and arranging them on the floor as a timeline, as a sequence. Because it's much easier for me to do that than actually have clips on a screen and arrange them. I very quickly found I can't do that. So what I did was printed them off, rearranged them on the floor. And so Michael saw that I have this habit of rearranging images on the floor in a quite intuitive way, and that's how I make my work. And he said, why don't you just do that with your own work? Why don't you just not categorise your work and just treat them like any other material? Am I paraphrasing you again?
No, that's fine. Yeah.
And I thought, how amazingly freeing that would be. How easy would it be if I could just do that? So I just printed off all my work, and then I started to arrange it across the floor. But I just was finding a way to make a flow of images. So there wouldn't be any break. It would just be a flow of images, because we experience the world as a flow of images. And I definitely experience my work as a kind of flow of one idea to another. You'll also see that there are little snippets of text sometimes printed off that are stuck in amongst them. And that's because I write a lot, and I also collect other people's writing, or as quotes. And I really wanted that flow also to be interwoven, because that's, this is my practice. I have all of these snippets and things I bring together and things I make.
We spent quite a bit of time just sort of thinking, how do we group these things, didn't we, as well? Like, sometimes it's by colour, not very often. Sometimes there's a shape, sometimes there's a kind of conceptual connection, isn't there? So sometimes the connection isn't always obvious, I think. This kind of grid as well, that was quite interesting. A grid of works that you have to kind of investigate, and then a grid of windows, or sometimes it's not just your work, it's where it's situated as well, isn't it, sometimes, that gives it the connection.
That pulls it together. The Porthmeor window, and then the form of the Porthmeor window, and the forms that I've used, these kind of calligraphic forms, or the cuneiform, these kind of cuneiform shapes that I've used in this Universal Now work, pulling across from glass to paper. I mean, glass and paper kind of bounce off each other all the time in my work because I use them so often. And then we're into holes, because I can see the next one's coming up. 2 views of this work called Toll, which is also in the exhibition, this glass, freestanding glass form with a Menon toll printed on it. And then we were thinking about lozenges and threes. This is a section of threes, thinking about the light. So there's a film still from Lost Libraries film, which is a 2, but you're looking through 2 windows. Then this is a view through my window on a residency in Istanbul, which then is the 3 of the gilded light coming through that window as it fell upon the stairs, moving through to 3s of James standing on the dock.
This was an important one, wasn't it? The kind of the split rock.
Yeah, so it's a rock, a piece of gabbro that I filmed for The Mother's Bones. And in the film, I use this kind of green-red split, like as if you had, 3D. Because, of course, a rock is 3-dimensional, but when you represent it on a film screen, it's flat, and it was a way of bringing it back. And in the film, the rock kind of pulls itself apart into the 3D, and it kind of fizzes and tries to resolve itself, and then it finally does, and then it vanishes. And that's something about that I wanted at the beginning of the book, this kind of doubling, this kind of inability to be reconciled was really important to me. And the other work that was really important to me at the beginning of the book is a work called Many Ways, because the book's called Walking A Cappella, and of course there are many ways. And as artists, you will all be finding the many ways that there are so many ways. There's 2 book plates. One is of a road with a green field on one side and a field of corn on the other side. But the other one, which is a wet road moving up, but it's also a river, and the river and I've cut the river into the road. It's as if the road becomes a river, the road's like flowing. And this tripling these possibility of maybe instead of there's kind of 3 roads, but one of them's a river. That is a work that still excites me. I'm still excited about this work. It's a double spread, so it's pretty big. So I felt like this somehow represented something about the irreconcilability that I wanted in the book, something about the not knowing, something being in between. Is it a river? Is it a road? So, so this is not in the studio, this is at my house, because of course then we sort of got hungry and tired and went home and we just carried on.
A bit like Scrabble, wasn't it? It sort of goes this way and then this way and then this way, and then you get all these connections that sort of spill off each other.
Yeah.
So that was it became a jigsaw in a way, didn't it, to kind of fit everything together in a way that would make sense. The other thing that we sort of discovered when I came to visit was, I was like, do you have an archive of your work? And you do, but a lot of it is these kind of offcuts that you've kept from doing Universal Nows and other things. And you've got these big boxes of them. I thought they were really interesting. They're sort of like ready-made, really interesting graphic shapes that we could kind of use. We didn't really know what to do with them at first, did we? We kind of just thought they were interesting. So we started just scanning them. I mean, this is the room that I was staying in your house, isn't it? So this is your library, which has so much of the material that's used to make your work, which was a really cool space to just sort of be in and, live in for a few days. But it seemed to me that the library was a really important thing and a really important resource for you. So the idea sort of came up between us. Why don't we, instead of making a book, why don't we kind of make a mini library of books within one? Because there's so many different aspects to your work. Like James was saying, there's performance, there's events, there's film, there's works on paper, works in glass. So it's not just kind of one thing. And we thought that this book should kind of represent that somehow. As you say, also not kind of going, these are the works on glass, these are the works on paper. So we thought this idea of a library could be quite interesting.
Can we say about time?
Yeah, of course.
Because this library I have amassed, they're arranged in date order. Because the first time I started to really collect books to use in my practice, it was to make the Universal Now, and the Universal Now is a series about time. So the most important thing for me about the book was its date of publication, not the title or how big it was or what colour the spine was or anything else. So because of that, I'm very sort of zoned into this book as a moment in time, that it was printed on a certain paper in a certain era when... So I only collect books for the Universal Now from 1894 to sort of the present day, but it's very limited because before 1894 you didn't have photographs in books, you had etchings, and I only want photographs because I want it to be where the light really came into a real camera and you have that index correlation to the outside. I don't want it to be a drawing of the monument, let's say. So that's important to me. And then really books are not much printed anymore of landmarks because everyone just looks up on their phone. Like, why would you need a guidebook to London? It's completely redundant now. And in the 80s, they moved off into doing aerial views of places, which are useless to me because you can't cut them together. So it's kind of time limited, but they're strictly in date order. So this feeling of a book, not only, so the date of its publication is there, but everything about that book, it means the paper is of that time. It means that the way that photograph is printed is using the technology of that time, like 1951 or whatever it is. It means that the designer of that time is working in a way that's 1951, not 1900 or 2000. It's 1951. And it's really, you can really tell. It's like a kind of, yeah.
You really can. And I think it's interesting because the other thing that's interesting about that is the fold, I think. Because books, obviously, to make a book, you have to, we'll show you in a minute, but you have a big printed sheet that gets folded up and then bound together and then trimmed at the end. So this idea of a fold that's in your work kind of everywhere, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like by making a book, you kind of incorporate a fold in its making, but you don't necessarily see it. And I think this is kind of a library of folds as well in some weird way that's kind of sort of hidden away. So we thought that was quite interesting, these ideas of, these offcuts, the kind of flow of things, and then this idea of it's not one thing, it's many, and we can kind of piece it together.
Multiple. Yeah.
Multiple. And thinking about time and things like that. So this is a sort of present. I went away after kind of staying with you for a few days, and then kind of made this sort of presentation that kind of summed up. So when you bind a book, you have to think of it in terms of 16-page signatures or sections, because, and we'll show you in a minute, but when it's folded, you fold it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, you get 16 leaves. So you have to think of these kind of breakers. So we thought maybe each 16-page signature appears different to the next through paper, typesetting, and layout. So this is, a block of 16s, if you see the book from above, if you see what I mean. So we could do it all the same paper, or we could do each one a different paper. Or we could kind of interleave it and do 16 of this, 16 of this, 16 of this, and then repeat it. Then we had this idea of kind of a wrap that goes around every alternative 16-page signature, which we were thinking could kind of include, the essay, which we'll talk about, the conversation.
Essay,
conversation sort of weaving in and out through these signatures. So a few different ways of thinking about it. And in terms of typefaces and layout, each printed sheet, would have a subtly different typographic approach. Each uses a different serif typeface, probably, has a different page size and a different underlying grid. So when designers design things, they make themselves a grid, which is like a framework to kind of place images and text. So we could kind of do one like that, pretty boring and straightforward, with some images like that in this kind of a grid. The next one might have some marginalia down the side, and we might have, everything's off to the left, and maybe all the images have this kind of weird page, this border thing around them. Could be sort of centered with big images, kind of very sort of classic coffee table book kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or we might have something that's very much like a kind of pocket book, a paperback kind of thing. And it's all about the arrangement of images and text and this sort of thing. So just with that, just using some basic introduction text, we thought you could have varying sizes and varying different papers, varying different typographic systems and grid systems, and then it became about how do we combine them. So each one of these 16 pages would have a different typographic approach, but then you could combine them like this. So we could, to actually make a book that's got different size paper would just be impossibly expensive on a production scale that's more than 10. So we had to kind of give ourselves some limitations. So we decided that it was going to have to be a certain size, and how do we then put these different books on that size paper? You could kind of put it with a black background. You could put crop marks around them. We had this idea that you could kind of use a kind of very, very subtle varnish over most of it, but not the area that is the books, so you get this kind of textural change. Then we started thinking about these sheets. So maybe I'll get one out now. So that is a whole 16 pages on one piece. Can I fold this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gave it to me.
Yeah.
You went to Ghent and fetched it. You can
yeah.
Look at it.
So then they fold it like that. I think they fold it that way next, actually. And then like this. I've done it wrong, but in the end, you get a spine here, and then they trim this bit, and this bit, and that's 16 pages from one piece of paper. Yeah. So to do that, you kind of have to impose what's called imposition, impose the pages in a specific way so that when they fold, they get to that end point. So we thought, what about, imagining that these books have come straight off the press before being folded. If it's a small book, they would impose it differently to a big book because it's different size paper, different whatever. So if sheet 1 is kind of like that, and then another sheet goes next to it, you get this kind of really weird end result where you kind of, everything's a bit off-centered. So we kind of thought about that as an idea, kind of the imposition. And we even sort of discussed this idea of kind of scoring as well. So it's as if it had been ready to fold, but just hadn't been folded. Or we thought maybe we use the cutouts like this as backgrounds for the different page sizes. Or just use a little cutout and things like this.
So just to say then, a lot of this question is, if we want to have many different books in one book, and all of those books are, of course, different sizes, how do you show the different sizes? Like, what's the... Given that we can't physically cut it out and bind a book together that has got different size sections, how do we demonstrate that? And then what do we do with the remainder bits, and how do they sit next to each other? How are they folded if they're different sizes? So that was a big
big
thing
question.
to think about, yeah.
And we thought maybe we could do these wraps with the different things. We kind of wanted to use these offcuts, didn't we? How do we use that? Maybe we have a whole section of them. Maybe they kind of weave in and out. These are all kind of unresolved questions at this point. This is all very much kind of speculation of things we could do. And then we thought about some special processes. So a lot of your work is about folds, so we could have a fold out, like a kind of big map that comes out or something of your Lost Libraries tour. This is something I really want to do, and I asked the printer about it, and they were like, no, definitely not. But fold the sheet before you actually print it, so you get this kind of weird kind of overprint and this kind of flap thing.
Which is fun, which is something I've done in my work with the lithographs with Breuer, where I've printed an image, folded the paper and printed it again. And then when you open it, parts of the second image move away from themselves. So it's something I've done in my work, but it's just too...
On an industrial scale, it's just
too hard to do.
Yeah. Or die cutting, thinking about the cutouts again.
Die cutting's when you...
It's like a cookie
make
cutter.
a metal cookie, and you cut out the paper so that you don't have to have a squared off piece of paper.
Or glue an actual one in. That's the other thing. And then this idea of a kind of filter, which is sort of, thinking of the idea of glass and stained glass, kind of having like a kind of gel film, which is something else that you've
as a kind of
before.
outer wrap.
As a wrap.
So just to do a quick recap, I said, it'd be great to work with you on this book. And you were like, okay. So Michael came, looked at everything, looked at the way I tend to line things up on the floor, had this brilliant suggestion, went away, and we spent ages in my library. It's just really nice to just spend 4 hours with somebody just looking at books. I really enjoyed it. We both really enjoyed it. But from there, we needed to not have all the ideas, because then, so we were... I tend to want all the ideas, but you were like, if we're going to do one of these, we've got to do one fully. We can't do loads because it'll just get confusing. So we're going to step away from that for a minute and talk about text. So when I approached Michael, I was sort of like, I'd already thought it'd be great to have this image flow, and then maybe there'd be a text flow. So instead of having your essay, which is like a section of itself, maybe at the beginning of the image flow or something, maybe a conversation could weave through like a ribbon through the whole thing. And so I'd already thought I would like to do that, and I approached a writer and curator called Sophie J. Williamson to have a dialogue with me. So the way we did it was to have 2-hour calls. We had 3 2-hour calls, and we just talked. We talked in a completely unstructured way because that's what I wanted. I'll never do that again because it's a complete nightmare, because then I had to impose some structure. What was good about that is we had a conversation that was incredibly wide-ranging between us. So Sophie ended up talking about going to sex clubs in London, and I ended up talking about going to dance clubs, and we talked about all these sort of things that are like between her interests and my interests, but that sort of flow through each other. So it works beautifully in the book. It was just a nightmare to edit into something that actually made proper sense and wasn't insanely long. I wanted, if I was going to commission an essay, I wanted it to be by somebody who was really good at writing. And I've known for a long time a novelist, her name is Joanna Kavanagh, and I just phoned her up and I said, "You're a really great writer. would you come and just write about my work? She's not an art, she never does art writing. And she just said, yeah, I'd love to do that. And she said, oh, I'll just come to Cornwall and I'll spend a couple of days with you and I'll write an essay. That's exactly what she did. And she did such an amazing job. I'm going to read you a tiny bit of her writing, which will help to explain why I think the writing is so good. And then I realised, and then I thought, I'll just write the introduction. It's my book. I should just get on with it. I'll write the introduction. And then I realised that I sort of couldn't. So I did write an introduction, but I also asked Hamad Nassar to write a preface. And both Joe and Hamad did something that was very much like the approach that we were taking in the form of the book, you know, the visual decisions in the book, which was to use things that I do in my work anyway inside their text. So, for example, Hamad, he's writing about my practice and the first time he came across my work. And then he says, an ellipsis is a set of 3 dots, see examples above, that indicates the omission of words from a quotation or the trailing off in speech or thought. It is an invitation to complete the sentence or thought and to start a conversation. Elliptical reading is an invitation-made artwork. So I had a work called Elliptical Reading, but he uses this ellipsis across the piece of his introduction in a way that's really beautiful. It's something that is in my work and it's just in his writing. And Jo, in her much longer essay, also does a similar thing. So her essay starts, it's a wild rain-lashed day in Cornwall, the height of June, almost the summer solstice. I'm standing with Abigail Reynolds in Holman Quarry near Lanner. Above, a granite wall, stained russet by water erosion and punctured with holes. It looks like a vast musical instrument or a formerly immaculate sculpture. Yet, Reynolds tells me, this place was once a testing ground for percussive rock drills. The holes were bored in the granite by anonymous workers, labouring day after day for untold years. It's a beautiful and eerie place. Our clothes are soaked. The rain is fizzing on the rocks. There's damp foliage everywhere. Trees and ferns in luminescent greens. We're sliding through mud and water. So she moves from this moment where we're standing in the quarry in this pouring rain into the beginning of my work, A Book of Holes. So that's page 1. And then page 6 of 11, she says, she's continuing to describe her time with me. She says, in the studio, Reynolds makes strong tea, brings over the cups. We're sitting on the blue sofa gazing at the beach. Rain is slamming onto the windows. The horizon has vanished. Nonetheless, it's time to go, Reynolds decides. We drink our tea, then head out into the rain. First we drive, then we walk. The hedges are decked in sodden leaves. No one is around. The trees are swaying in the wind, showering us with rainwater. We go to Holman Quarry, where Reynolds tells me about A Book of Holes, as I mentioned at the start. If you want to read about that again, you could circle back to the beginning, turn back, and then resume. We slide, slip, glide across the quarry floor. Everything is glazed with rain. So what's beautiful about that for me is that there is a lot of return in my work. There is a lot of doubling back. There is a lot of doubling. And she just does that in the text. And secondly, what's beautiful is the rain. So the rain sort of holds us together. And I've been talking to her about my interest in the word glaze, glazed as in glazing, glass, and glisse, which means to slide. And before the title, A Book of Walking A Cappella, I wanted the show to be called Lease. It didn't work because you immediately just think about rental, and it also doesn't work because nobody knew how to spell it. But what I liked about it, the French word lisse, L-I-S-S-E, means very smooth. So water, slack water is lisse, and very smooth hair when you've brushed it is lisse. And glisse means to slide, so it's like lisse. And glacé means icy or glazed, so it's water but it's ice. And glass is like ice. It's molecularly like ice because I'm now glass. Glass is a super-cooled fluid. So it has the molecular structure of a fluid, but it's a solid. So all this beautiful crossing, and she just does it in the text somehow. She does it. We're there and we're sliding through this quarry, and the rain's falling, and then we slip and slide back, and there's all this wateriness and fluidity and this flow of images that I'm trying to get in the book. Anyway, I think it's a genius piece of writing. So, so it was really important to me that the writing was so also kind of showing my practice but in a different way, not just saying yes and then Abigail did this and then Abigail did that. I don't know. I'm showing the slide at the moment is inside the way I work, and I've done this for a long time, is I can't separate one thing from another. So I have books that are notebooks and I carry around all of the time and everything goes in them, and then later, and I might decorate them so I remember that they're mine. So this is number 7, number 3 maybe, and number 12. And I think I'm on 23 now. And when I finish one of the books, I number it and I then write a contents page, what's in it, which I do backwards so that I can find what's in it again. And in it, there will be lots of quotes. But then I also will have bits that are just about, you know, making sculpture and numbers and things like that. So in order to prepare for the text, I just went back through all of my notebooks and started stripping out quotes that I thought could be useful for the book, which then gave us a problem, which then we had loads of text material that I was really excited to include all of these quotes, little snippets of things that I'd written that are coming from my experience, that kind of things I've noticed around me in Penwith that go into my work, but not in a direct or obvious way, but are kind of floating or flowing through the book. So, you know, so in terms of text, I had these commission texts that I wanted, but when I approached Michael, I hadn't asked the writers. I hadn't even decided who I would ask. And Michael was explaining to me only yesterday that this is a backwards way of doing a book, because normally what you do is somebody comes to the designer and they've already not only asked the writers to write the text, but they've already been written, and then you just give them to the designer. Whereas I was so caught up in how this book could even be structured, like how could we even, what would it even begin to be, that I hadn't got round to the text. So that was...
I couldn't move forward without some material, but you couldn't have material unless we kind of knew what the structure was. So we were in this sort of loop for a little while, weren't we? Where it was like, who's going to make the first move here?
Yeah.
So
we had the image flow, but that wasn't enough to pin down the many, many kinds of decision about which books we were going to ghost or use, or which books from my library would come through, how these texts would fit into this, how long they even were. It was really,
Yeah. But we managed to resolve it. So we went back. I came back in May time, didn't I?
That's right.
April, May, and had another look through your library. Sort of, this was as you were kind of editing as well, wasn't it? I think so. We had the two things going on at the same time: editing text while kind of designing the book for the text, kind of thing, which is quite an interesting approach. And I think it comes through in the book itself. Really, it's all very organic. I think the way it's put together, it's not. It's very not linear. But I came back and we had a look at some books from the library that we thought might be kind of interesting to riff off. And what we didn't want to do was copy directly.
Like, for example, using facsimiles.
Facsimiles, yeah.
So like making copies and then pasting other content over. Because we have fundamentally taken 9 books from my collection, stripped out all the text and image content and replaced them. But we also, not as a facsimile though, but more as a...
In spirit.
Yeah.
This is one, this is called About Britain. It's from a series called About Britain. So we took elements of it, and you can sort of see the typographic style and the illustration here. This is a title page from the book, and then the kind of title page for that section within our book. So sometimes it's a relatively direct translation from one thing to another, but with your text. Just
using that very unusual, it's sort of like an unusual kind of shape, but it carries with it this 1951 moment when this book was made. This is a really classic book from 1951 for the Festival of Britain.
So this is one of the more kind of like direct translations, I would say, of our examples. So you can sort of see what we're doing here. So that's the end of that first section of 16 pages, and then the beginning of the next section of 16 pages. So it's got a title page. And then from there on out, we kind of had to fit things around, didn't we? So we had this kind of flow of images that was kind of walking a cappella over this landscape of different books, which was the kind of how we kind of reconciled these two ideas of this flow of images and this changing landscape, I guess. It was this walking a cappella thing. So we've kind of taken elements of this, like the grid what I would call the grid, which is placement of image and text and page number. But then around it, we've put your conversation with Sophie. So that's a very kind of flowing thing. This is another relatively direct translation. We didn't want to use the Thames and Hudson logo, so we had to kind of find a clever way of doing that. Now, our book, to get on that size of paper, we kind of had to go, we had a limitation on the size that we could actually print. So some of these books kind of fit within that size. This one, it's beyond. So
that's the original book.
Yeah. So we had to sort of figure out some way of kind of showing that. So if this is Wonders of Italy and we've only got that size, some of it has to crop off the bottom. And so you only see one little crop mark on the top left-hand side.
Here we are between two sections. This is the beginning of Wonder of Italy and the end of...
About Britain. So then sort of translating this became a bit of a problem. So, you know, it's a very kind of classic kind of layout, isn't it, this book? But to kind of put it over a size like this meant that we kind of ended up shunting things along. So if I show you here as well at the same time, this whole section has to kind of move along. So then when you turn this page, that image sort of carries over and wraps around onto that side. This is Tomorrow's People. So I don't know if you want to say something about Tomorrow's People. It's an important book for you, isn't it?
So Tomorrow's People, I've got 3 copies of this book. It was printed in 1972 and it's a photo record of Glastonbury Festival 1972, and it's by Ron Reed and Jeremy Sanford. And it's in it, the text talks about how in the future, after 1972, we're all going to live much more in the way that they were living at Glastonbury Festival. So we'll live more communally, we're close to the land, we're much more physically intimate with each other, we'll enjoy ourselves more, we will be less capitalistic. It didn't turn out like that, but it's great to read this book, which has just such hope for the future, and Glastonbury is like going to be the key that will unlock the secret of communal happiness, basically. So this is a book, it's not completely black and white, although we made it black and white, and it has these strange, like, cutouts sometimes. Yeah.
That's the kind of key one, isn't it?
So that was a book that it felt like we really should honour this book inside Walking A Cappella.
But again, obviously, because of the size, we end up with some margin around it. So you get this more white space than you get in the original. And because we had less text than the original, we had to kind of juggle it together and kind of fit it together in an interesting way. Sometimes it goes into black and white. So this was quite an interesting one. This kind of one column of text and then doing this. And it's because it's got so many people in it, we kind of wanted to put people in this one, didn't we? So we kind of went through your archive of
install shots.
Install shots. This was a particularly difficult one, wasn't it? This came up with a few issues. So most books obviously are kind of portrait and you go like this, but this particular book had a few really weird things about it, didn't it? It had like so many different fonts, so many different sort of proportions of images. The margins are never the same all the way around, and it's very long landscape. So to fit that on the book, we decided that we needed to flip it. And I got asked about this just before we went on, because we were testing it. And Mike came up and was like, "Did you know that slide, you've got it the wrong way?" I was like, "Yeah, no, that's what it's meant to be." But we had discussions about how we were going to do this, because if we were going to translate that really, faithfully.
Faithfully, it means some of the images would be upside down in our book. But we wanted that book in because it's just such a particularly strange, like mid-40s book and it was the only way, in the end, it became the vehicle for the snippets of text that are mine, that came out of the notebooks, because it has all these strange little aphorisms down the side, strange little bits of text, so it was possible to use that.
So when you say the snippets, these are the kind of quotes, isn't it?
Yeah, well, these are quotes from me rather than quotations, which all ended up in the epigraphs.
Yeah. So you end up with this kind of really weird typesetting as well, where everything's kind of really far apart and things. And then sometimes we were just like, oh, well, you came up with this. You were like, well, we've kind of, I don't know, what should we do? We've got some really key books in there. And then you were like, why don't we just make one up from the future? We've got loads from the past, but why don't we just pretend that this publisher is, publishing it
2035.
in 2035, I think we put in the context. So then I was just like, yeah, okay, this is where we can use these offcuts. So, we used really glossy paper for it and stuff like this, but it's still got this kind of flow going through. In a way, I kind of think this is the clearest section in some ways, because you're not worrying too much about placement of text and images. It's more kind of, this is the flow, and you just have a little caption down the bottom. But you still get these kind of interesting overlays and stuff. This one, Bronzes is another
Bronzes is the
cool
last
book
of the books inside the book.
So that's square. So then you kind of end up with this square crop, and then the other cool thing about Bronzes is to save money for printing. Maybe I'll go and get it. To save money in printing, often what people would do is do black and white on one side of the sheet, and then when you flip the sheet over, so you get a few pages black and white, and then when you flip the sheet on the other side, it's in colour. So to save, plates for printing. So we sort of did that as well. So you get some black and white, some colour. So we really sort of pumped up the saturation on these colour images. And then I went to the printer, didn't I?
So then there was an enormous amount of time where we proofread.
Masses, So I'll really quickly just sort of talk about the experience of going to the printer and what they do. The first thing that they do is what's called the imposition, which is where they take all the pages as digital files and then impose it as one big sheet, front and back of this sheet. So that's these that we'll show you in a second. When they've got that imposition, they make a printing plate. So this is it coming out. Basically, this is one colour of 4 that will end up being printed. So this is an aluminium plate. It's got a blue coating over it. There's a light that exposes onto it, line by line, and that light hardens the blue. Then it goes through a washer, and this is now coming out of the washer, and the washer gets rid of everything that's not hard. So then you end up with a kind of, it's like an etching plate in a way.
I think it's like a lithograph.
More like, it is a lithograph plate, So that is one colour of 4. And it's got all of the imposed pages on it. There's all these plates in kind of holders, and that's the printer. So you get, each of those towers, each of those kind of units is one colour. Each of those has a plate in it, and there's the plates getting loaded in. And then what happens? You have a big stack of paper. It gets fed in. And it goes through, so they do the black plate first, with black ink, and this is cyan, magenta colour, then yellow. And then here, underneath there, the paper gets flipped around, and the other side goes black, cyan, magenta, yellow. And it dries, very sort of roughly dries. And it comes out the other end, like that. So that's one of these sheets. So that is these ones. So we've got the other one,
Yeah.
So
this one.
As these were coming out, I sort of grabbed some because they sort of wanted to test it. So they shut off everything apart from the black plate for us. And so there's the black. There's black and cyan. Black, cyan and magenta. And then, the other one's at the gallery, isn't it?
It's at the gallery, yeah.
The other one has yellow, and then you get the complete set. So that's the other side. And then, as I say, it gets folded up properly and then put next to the other ones.
Yeah.
They're nice artefacts themselves, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they're really nice artefacts. They're sort of, yeah. I mean, for a while we kind of thought about keeping these colour bars and stuff when we were sort of designing it. And
It's a bit of a nightmare, this book, for a printer, because some of the crop marks were real crop marks.
and
But some of them were crop marks within the book to show
Yeah.
where the other book was. So that was like, must have been really scary. They'd be like, there's 2 sets of crop marks.
Yeah, yeah. So in the end, you know, they printed one section after another, so you get this kind of like cake almost, or like layers of strata of your book as it was coming out.
Yeah, which is a bit like the spine. You can sort of see
Yeah.
all the different colours on the spine because it's a open spine. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was sort of a decision that we made quite early on.
We decided we didn't want to do a hardback book because we kind of wanted a floppy book.
Yeah, so this lays completely flat. So yeah, so each of these comes off the printer, and then you have a look at it and decide if you like it, and then you can turn the levels up of the ink and whatever. So that's the finished book. So then, yeah, we thought this kind of wrapper, this jacket, we wanted hardback materials, but without it being a hardback, so it feels posh still, but it's still
But it's still floppy.
but it's still a kind of amalgamation and a floppiness.
So I think I said when we were talking at the exchange that a way to do this without having to change papers would be you'd print a paper texture onto the same paper, but that's really like, ugh, no, because that's not the right materiality, it's the wrong. And of course, when you look at the book yourselves, and there's such a thing as a dummy, which I didn't know, which is where you have a whole copy of the book, but it's not got any of the print on it, it's just a dummy, and you just feel the papers, because so much of books are really tactile. And I love the way, like even in a normal book, you know how far through you are just by how much weight you have on one hand or the other. Like you can literally see how far you are through the book. And here, every single signature has a different weight. Sometimes you get show through, which is what it's called, when you can see the ink on the back of the page coming through the front of the page, like this really nice overlay. Sometimes it's really glossy, like, contemporary.
Like a magazine or something.
Magazines, yeah. Sometimes it's quite heavy. The text part, Joe's essay is on brown, because in those mid-century books like this one, The Wonders of Italy, you of course have your plates on beautiful white paper, but you have your like this, but then you have, which they always has this, but then all of your text is on a matte colour stock. This is really foxed, but a nice grey. And so things we haven't talked about is the ribbon text. There was nowhere to put the end notes, so we put in a bookmark. So that you've got all your footnotes and you can use it as a bookmark. The snippets came in like these, as little arrows, through the book. And then there'll be a sort of collector's edition where I will paste in the actual snippets so that people will have parts of the books that I've used in the Universal Now and have these little kind of these little holes that you can look through actually in the book. And I think the reason why it's interesting to talk about here is because, we're all making work. How do you convey the underlying terrain of what it is you're working on? Because maybe it's not even really visible to you until you start trying to convey it. And somehow the practice of trying to make this book and going back through all my notebooks, just, when do you ever go back through your old notebooks? But you should, because it's full of material. And actually, one piece I made, I'd done a sketch years ago in a notebook, and I found it while I was looking for text for this book. And I was like, why have I never made that? So I just made it. This practice of trying to convey through the form as well as the content, if you see what I mean, like that this book kind of brings out elements of my practice in the form, whether it's the text or, as I was talking about, by reading out a couple of those snippets, or this feeling of image flow, or this feeling of time, and how folding is always there in books. All of these things are just present in the book that we've been able to do, for which I completely have to thank Michael, because I wouldn't have dared to make you know, this is kind of a brave book, and it's a very expensive book because nobody changes paper. It's really expensive to change paper. But it was the only way that we
could
felt
do
that
all
we
of
could,
what we wanted to do.
yeah, have that as a physical thing rather than as an idea. So,
Yeah.
so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.